Every time you opened your mouth to defend yourself, you handed them exactly what they needed to destroy you. You explained yourself. You justified your choices. You argued your case with logic and emotion and everything you had. And you still lost. Not because you were wrong, because you kept talking. Every word was information they used. Every explanation was a concession they banked. Every justification was proof that you needed their approval, and they knew it. The moment you started explaining, you already lost. Welcome to Maestropsychology. Today we're going to talk about the most aggressive psychological move available to you. One that doesn't require you to say a single word. Strategic silence, and how to use it to take your power back. In 1513, Niccolò Machiavelli was rotting in a Florentine prison. He had been tortured. He had lost everything. His position, his status, his power. And in that cell, with nothing but time and silence, he began to write. What he produced was The Prince. Not a moral guide, not a self-help book, a cold, surgical manual on how power actually works. And one of the observations that cut deepest, the rulers who talked the most were feared the least. Machiavelli watched powerful men fall, not because of their enemies, because of their own mouths. They revealed their plans, they justified their decisions, they negotiated with flatterers who needed information, and they gave it freely. Chapter 23 of The Prince is called On Flatterers. Machiavelli writes that the prince must surround himself with advisers who tell him the truth, but only speak when asked. The man who controls when he speaks controls the room. Robert Greene built on this directly. Law 4 of the 48 laws of power always say less than necessary. He writes, when you speak more than needed, you appear common and lose control of the situation. The more you say, the more ordinary you look. So here is the framework. Strategic silence does 4 things simultaneously, and each one is a weapon. Most people stumble onto one of these by accident. The dangerous ones use all 4. Weapon 1. Silence cuts off the manipulator's fuel. Every manipulator, whether it's a toxic partner, a domineering boss, a passive-aggressive family member, runs on one thing: your reaction, your anger, your tears, your frustration. That's their food. The moment you stop reacting, you starve them. Not dramatically, not coldly, calmly. You look at them, you feel nothing, and you say, nothing. Watch what happens. The person who expected an explosion gets silence instead, and silence terrifies them. Weapon 2. Silence forces them into uncertainty. Here is a psychological truth. The human brain cannot tolerate an empty space. It will fill it with fear, guilt, or self-doubt. When you stop responding, their mind does your work for you. This is not theory. Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, built his entire method around this. In Never Split the Difference, he says, after you make a statement or an offer, go completely silent, because the other person will feel compelled to fill the void. And when they do, they negotiate against themselves. Weapon 3. Silence shifts who holds the power. There is a rule almost no one teaches you. In any conversation, in any conflict, whoever speaks first after a tense moment concedes. Silence is a bet, and most people fold immediately. Weapon 4. And this one is the deepest cut. Silence signals that you don't need their validation. That is the manipulator's nightmare. They built the entire trap around your need to be understood, accepted, approved. The moment your silence says, "I don't need any of that from you," the trap collapses. Now let's make this real. Because theory is worthless if you can't use it at 10 p.m. when someone is pushing every button you have. Scenario 1. Your partner says something specifically designed to provoke you, something they know will trigger a reaction. Instead of arguing, you look at them, calmly, for 3 full seconds. Then you walk away. No slamming doors, no sarcasm, just absence. What happens next? They sit alone with their own words. No argument to win, no reaction to feed on, just silence, and the echo of what they said. That silence forces them to hear themselves. That is more powerful than any comeback you could ever deliver. Scenario 2. A colleague takes credit for your work in a meeting, in front of everyone. Every instinct says interrupt, correct the record. But you don't. You stay silent. You observe. You let it finish. After the meeting, 3 people approach you privately. Because they noticed the inconsistency. Because your silence was confident. Because someone who is scrambling to defend themselves looks guilty. But someone who stays calm looks like the only adult in the room. Scenario 3. A salary negotiation. You state your number, and then nothing. Complete silence. Most people panic here. They start justifying the number, offering compromises before they're asked, talking themselves into a lower offer. You don't. You wait. This brings us to the one rule that ties all of it together. The rule Machiavelli never stated directly, but every line of The Prince implies it. And once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. The rule is this: you only explain yourself to people who deserve the explanation, and almost no one does. Think about the last 3 times you explained yourself. Were you talking to a judge? Or were you talking to someone who had already decided what they thought of you? Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." He wasn't being poetic. He meant it tactically. When you respond with silence to someone's cruelty or manipulation, you refuse to become what they are. That refusal is the most powerful act of dominance available to you. Here is what silence is not. It is not sulking. It is not the cold shoulder. It is not passive aggression dressed up as strategy. Those are emotional reactions, wearing silence as a costume. Real strategic silence comes from a place of complete internal calm. You are not punishing them. You are simply not participating. The difference is everything. Cold silence says, "I'm hurt, and I want you to notice." Strategic silence says, "I have nothing to prove to you." One is dependency, the other is freedom. You will know which one you're practicing by how you feel while you're silent. If you're silent and anxious, waiting for them to respond, checking your phone, feeling the urge to send one more message, that's not strategic silence. That's just suffering alone. True strategic silence feels like relief, like you finally put down something heavy. So how do you build this? Because you can't just decide to be silent in the middle of an emotional ambush. That's like deciding to be calm during a car accident. The skill has to exist before the moment arrives. The practice is simple. For 1 week, stop explaining yourself in small situations. Your coffee order, your weekend plans, why you were quiet today, why you didn't reply immediately. These small explanations are the habit you're breaking. Every unnecessary explanation is a rehearsal for weakness. When you stop over-explaining in small moments, you recalibrate your nervous system. You start to feel, viscerally, that you are okay without their approval, that nothing terrible happens when you don't justify your choices, and that feeling becomes your foundation. Machiavelli's final word on this, and I'll leave you with it. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most people quote that line and think it's about cruelty. It's not. It's about this: a person who is always available, always explaining, always seeking understanding, is loved, maybe, but never feared, never truly respected. The person who speaks only when it matters, who doesn't chase, doesn't justify, doesn't beg to be understood, that person carries a weight, a gravity. People feel it even when they can't name it. That gravity is what you've been giving away. Every single time. You opened your mouth. Do this once in silence. Just once. Don't respond where you normally would. Don't justify where you normally would. Don't argue where you normally would. Just watch. Watch what happens to the room. Watch what happens to the other person. And watch what happens to you. If this shifted something in you, drop a comment below. Tell me where in your life you've been talking when you should have been silent. I read every one. And if this is the kind of content you want more of, subscribe, because the next video is going to hit harder than this one.